Kelli Scarr, welcome to the Witch Wave.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so happy to have you here. And insiders know that you and I have actually spoken before on an episode of Witch Wave Plus when your prior album came out,
hmm
because I am such a big fan of that album. And that's your album, No Rush. And so I do just quickly want to encourage people to go and listen to that episode if they feel compelled to, because it is one of my favorite conversations. Um, but moving to the present moment, Kelli, I thought that I could not love your music anymore. And then you created this new album, Greater Mysteries. Oh my gods, it is so exquisite. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
So, by way of introduction, since we spoke before to our more exclusive limited audience, and we're now speaking to the whole Witch Wave audience, I would just love for you to root people in your musical and
Mm,
magical practice.
mm.
Why do you make music, and how does it feel magical to you broadly? Like, what is your approach to making music?
Sure. I think in order to answer that question, I immediately return to my earliest memories of making music, which was singing with my grandmother. And she used to have this wood rocking chair, and she would sit me in her lap, and we would sing together. And I mean, of course, I don't remember the specifics from that time, but I imagine that I was so moved by the resonance of our voices together.
Hmm.
And we were also singing spiritual music at the time. So I'm sure that was what first formed the connection for me between singing and resonance and something greater being at play in the universe.
Mm.
And I've basically been chasing that ever since. So, um, my process has evolved over time, but I would say this recent album, um, I really started dipping into channeling more consciously. So it's like I can't even remember like writing a lot of the material.
Whoa.
Yeah. And I know that certain elements were influenced by the setting that I was in. I wrote a lot of the seeds when I was at an artist residency in Crete, and there
Mm.
was just the sound of the cicadas was just like pulsing in the background. And as you, I'm sure, noticed, and hopefully folks who are listening to this when they go check out the music will hear that there is this pulse happening the whole time. And, being in that environment and kind of surrendering to that really kind of allowed me to get out of the way and for the magic to come through.
Oh, and my goodness, did it ever. So, forgive me for talking about your prior album, but that album is so important to me.
Mm,
And I've talked about it a few times over the years on the show. No Rush, to me, it's kind of like I mean, there's certainly lots of beautiful lyrics, but it also feels like a sound bath. You worked with Nate Martinez,
mhm,
who is a sound bath healer, in
mhm,
addition to, a multi-instrumentalist, as you are as well. And as I told you when we first spoke, No Rush, it's like this sanctuary of an
mm,
album. It's an album that I shared with you I listened to in the bath because it's just a sacred, um, soothing, centering album. And I feel myself struggling to describe your music because it really, to me, transcends genre, and maybe we can talk about that in a moment.
mm,
But I I I because I love that album so much, and it was is so soothing and such a touchstone for me, and it came out during the pandemic.
mhm.
When you shared your new music with me, I was like a little nervous.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
I just that is such a precious album to me. And Greater Mysteries, it really does feel like a departure in a lot of ways,
Mhm,
and yet I would say there's a similar through line of like lots of different musical styles, but I think it also lives in the world of ambient music
Mm-hmm.
and spiritual music, even though, again, there's a lot of lyrics as well. How
Mm-hmm.
would you describe sonically, before we
Mm.
get into the subject matter, sonically, how do you describe Greater Mysteries?
Oh gosh. I'm struggling because I still don't have a great answer to this question, but I guess, one way I've described it is it's mythic jazz to a pulse.
Yes, perfect. It
Yeah.
is. There is a lot of kind of jazz time signatures and
Yeah.
instrumentation.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, when people think of jazz, I think people who aren't very familiar with
Mm-hmm.
that broad genre
Mm-hmm.
sometimes think of it as very, like, I don't know, saxophony and,
Yeah. Bebop.
being in a club.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas this to me feels like it's a little more in line with like when Coltrane, both Coltranes,
Yeah.
John and
Yeah.
Alice, when they both got really more into their like spiritual vibes.
Yeah.
Are there any other musical anchors or North Stars for you that you had in mind?
In terms of like influencing the sound,
Yeah.
yeah. Hands down, the North Star for many years has been Talk Talk Spirit of Eden.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Such a beautiful album. And I think we talked about that last time
Okay.
too.
Yeah.
That album
See,
is
still.
so, so precious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
and, you know, that album, I don't know how many people know about this, but it was largely improvised. Like they brought players into the studio in a dark room and basically just hit record and had them improvise. And then they chopped up all the playing and then created the compositions out of the like fabric of the improv. So we borrowed that approach when we were making Greater Mysteries. I mean, yeah, we can get into it later, but yeah, it's largely improvised.
Wow. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Okay. And just to also give people a little of the musical texture, and I
Sure.
should say that some people are going to be watching this on YouTube, but the full episode with my formal intro and, the witch wire question from a listener and everything, that will have some of your songs edited into it. So I
Great.
really do recommend that anyone watching this on YouTube also check out the full Witch Wave episode, which will be released on the same day that this is. But that said, let's name some of the instruments that people will hear.
Sure. Okay. So the foundation of the recordings is myself singing,
Mm-hmm.
and Sam Kassirer is playing piano. Jeff Lipstein is playing drums, and D. James Goodwin, who's also the producer, is playing electric bass.
Mm.
Um, and then on top of that, we recorded about 10 other players. So we've got someone who played clarinet and flute. We've got trombone. We have another vocalist who we'll probably get into later, plays the part of a character in the myth of Inanna.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a cello player, we have a choir,
Oh,
and then we have a few guitar players who play different styles and types of guitar.
oh, so beautiful. Okay,
Yeah.
since you have invoked her sacred name into our magic circle,
Yeah.
when you were kind of coming up with the description for this album, you wrote about how this is based or at least inspired by the myth of the descent of Inanna.
Yeah.
So some listeners are going to know about that because it's come up on the show before, but for those who don't know Inanna and her
Mm-hmm.
myth, can you give us just the littlest summary of it?
Yeah. So I like to first start with the fact that Inanna is the first poem of written record, and it was written by a priestess named Enheduanna 5,000 years ago in Sumeria, which is now Iraq. And so
Yes.
first, that is just like magic. And what, I'm sure the story had been told for thousands of years prior to that, but what we know, which was found on clay tablets a couple hundred years ago, is that Inanna was the queen of heaven and earth. And she heard a call to go to the underworld to attend the funeral rites of her sister Ereshkigal's deceased husband.
Mm-hmm.
And basically she thinks she knows what she's doing and she has all of her powers about her, and as she starts on this journey to the underworld, she has to surrender an element of her power at each of these 7 gates until she
Yes.
reaches the bottom. And I don't know if you want me to go all the way.
Let me pause you
Okay.
there.
Yeah.
Let me pause you there and say that one of my favorite parts of the myth is as she goes through each gate, she's shedding something that she's wearing.
Yes.
So by the end, I believe she's nude entirely. Is that right? So she's completely shed her crown, and I'm forgetting her scepter, her necklace, all of these different kind of ornamentations of power or talismans. And then she's totally bare.
Yeah.
And then, you know, furthers her descent into the underworld.
Yeah.
And, you know, we'll just say things ensue. She eventually, as I recall, she dies pretty brutally. I think she's hung.
She's hung on a hook.
Yeah, she's hung on a hook.
And she's left to rot for 3 days.
Yes. And then, of course, she is brought back to life. I think in some tellings she's rescued. And eventually, you know, it goes on the ascent. She is reborn. She's resurrected. And I imagine a lot of listeners know that a lot of these poems about descents, about catabasis, they often are based on, you know, the movement of planets. And so my understanding is that Inanna was the planet Venus. And so when Venus would, you know, kind of be, what is it, the morning star and the evening star? Like, so this is kind of a metaphorical myth that's based on what the planets in the sky were doing. Is that what you found as well?
Yes. And also mirrors the regenerative cycle of nature.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, of course. Of course. So when did you fall in love with this myth, and what made you decide to make a whole album about it?
Well, the theme of the album is transformation, and the theme came first.
Okay.
I kept wanting to know more about the cycle. I had gone through, you know, I mean, many looking back now, but I had just gone through a big one myself, a big descent. And I think it first came by way of Maureen Murdoch's book, The Heroine's Journey. So I picked up that book and I was like, okay, right. Like, this is all about transformation. This is about a cycle. This is about a cycle of change that affects you on the emotional, social, spiritual, psychological level. And in that book, she mentions the myth of Inanna several times, but it didn't really get me yet. And somewhere between deciding on the theme of transformation and going to Crete to do this artist residency, because I knew I was working on a new record, I came across my mentor. Her name's Dr. Catherine Svela, and she is a mythologist.
Ooh,
and
that's the best job ever.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
So I started working with her, and, you know, long story short, I was in Crete actually a second time. So this is like 2 years into making this music. And she has a podcast about mythology, and she had done a 4-part series on Inanna. I'm driving around Crete with my girlfriend, and she's like, I want to know more. Like, tell me about your mentor. And I was like, let's listen to this series. So we're listening to this 4-part series, and it just struck me. I was like, this is my girl. I'm like, this is the way I'm going to go deeper. Because my mentor had been pushing me. She was like, you're not going dark enough. Like, there's so much more richness to this cycle that you're not allowing yourself to experience or express. And so, yeah, hearing her tell the story of Inanna and it, you know, her interpretation of all of the layers of it really took me deeper in. And I was like, okay, I've got to stay here. Like this, there's something for the music here.
Okay. I have way too many questions based on what you just said. The first one is just a very nosy question. Yeah. So if you don't want to answer it, totally fine. But you made a reference to going through a dark cycle in your own life. Is there anything that you feel comfortable sharing around that?
Sure. I mean, well, there was one that I was a part of, you know, collectively, which was COVID, right?
Right. Of course.
And looking back now, of course, I can see that was like such an initiation, an opportunity for initiation, in addition to, you know, all of the destruction that occurred for so many and continues to. But I think it started there. And then I went through like a really painful breakup. And then I moved from New York City to upstate New York, which was like my dream, but of course came with a lot of its own challenges.
Yeah.
And I was going through a really hard time parenting. Um, I was what do I want to say? Reconsidering my relationship with alcohol,
Mm-hmm.
and abstaining for long periods of time. And so it was like a combination, I would say, of like 6 kind of areas where I was
Yeah.
being pulled into the underworld and having to really face some hard, dark times.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry you went through that. And I'm so happy that you made this beautiful music out of
Yeah.
it, because I really do think that one of the most magical things about art is that it does help us transmute not just pain, it can be pleasure, but it helps us transmute our emotions into something we can share with others, and then it becomes an elixir for other people. And
Yes.
so this album certainly is that for me, and I know it's going to be for many, many people. So I want to also ask about this mythologist.
Hmm.
When you say she's your mentor, what does that mean exactly? How do you work with a mythologist? What is that relationship like?
Yeah. Well, I had first heard about her through her podcast, actually, and she was interviewing another mythologist, and there was something about the way my mentor, Dr. Svela, reflected back to the person she was interviewing what they had just said, that I was like, oh, I like the way she interprets things. So
Mm-hmm.
I Google her, I go on her website, and I see that she, in of the many services she offers, is creative mentoring, and I didn't even know that was a thing. And so
Mm.
I'm like reading the description, I'm like, oh my god, this is what I need. Like, because again, I'd like set out to make this record. I knew at that point that I was going to Greece. I knew I wanted it to be about transformation, but I was like, where I need help.
Mm-hmm.
So reach out to her, and we basically started meeting every single Friday, starting in April 2022. So it's been 3 years now.
All online or
All
in person?
online.
Okay.
She's in Colorado. We
Okay.
meet we meet via Zoom every week, and she's been like the doula of my project.
Oh, I
Yeah.
love that so much. How beautiful.
It's the greatest gift. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. So she's kind of like, yeah, a creative midwife in a way.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
So
Exactly.
wonderful. And so you start working on some of this music.
Mhm.
How did Inanna in particular start coming through for you, whether sonically or lyrically?
Well, I think, on the sonic front, I was able to start to express how I felt her experience might sound,
Mm.
through the stages of the cycle, um, which I think is pretty apparent when you hear it, like where you're at in the stages. Um, and then lyrically, I mean, it just kind of organically started happening. Like in the first song, it's called First Days.
Hmm.
And if you're not familiar, or you are, I highly recommend. There's a translation um, by Diane Wolkstein and
Oh, yeah.
Samuel Noah Kramer. And
Yep.
the opening of their translation is like, in the first days, in the very first days, in the first nights, in the very first nights. And as you'll hear in the music, that ends up showing up in the opening track of the album. Um, and then I kind of want to like make it a little Easter eggy for folks. I don't want to give
Yeah.
away like all of it, but there's like noticeable points in the cycle of the record where you will notice that you're hearing words that you've heard before, or you've read before, or if you felt before. Because that's
Hmm.
certainly how, like, reading this myth, I was like, oh, I know this story. Like,
Yeah.
it's in my blood, it's in my bones. Like,
Yes.
yeah, I'm getting the chills. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. But that's what I often think about that myth, because Joseph Campbell has had a huge influence on me, and yet he was a very flawed scholar and a flawed individual, and he absolutely had very like heteronormative and gender normative and patriarchal ways of looking at mythology.
Mhm.
And I remember encountering someone, and for those who aren't super familiar with Joseph Campbell, we'll just say he was like the ultimate mythologist, and he had, so many books, but his most famous one, Hero with a Thousand Faces, basically talks about like the myth, the idea of
Mm-hmm.
a hero that goes on a journey. At first they refuse the call, then they
Mm-hmm.
say okay, then they get a mentor or a guide who eventually, there are a lot of trials, eventually they go into the underworld, they come back out, and then they reintegrate, right? And so I remember reading that he was once asked, like, well, does this apply to women? And I think, didn't he teach at like Barnard? I think he taught at like, or was it Sarah Lawrence? It was
Sarah Lawrence.
an
Yeah.
all woman school. So he had
Yeah.
all these female students.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, your myths are about motherhood and your myths are about loving a man or whatever. I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
And it's like, what are you fucking talking about? Inanna is going on a journey. She was probably the first story where somebody, and it happens to be a feminine entity, is going on a journey, has trials, goes into an underworld, comes out. She's a heroine, right?
Yeah.
And so it's thrilling to me that her story is being retold and reclaimed, and you're obviously doing it in your own style as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been hearing her name a lot lately. I'm sure you have too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, did you consciously work with her as a goddess? Like, did you set up an altar for her or any of that kind of, more traditional worship? Or is your connection through her sonic and creative, which I think is absolutely a form of devotion?
Yeah. I think for me, it's more of an energetic thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that once I opened the door of the myth, like it just kind of became like a part of me and the lens that I was viewing things through. Um, I'm looking up because I have this picture of a terracotta sculpture of Aphrodite on my wall, which I couldn't really explain from the beginning, but for some reason I bought this picture on Etsy and it's been on my wall for 3 years, and I have all the names of the songs going around her in a circle. But I'm not a scholar of mythology, so I don't know all the intricacies, but like what I do know is that it is thought that like, Inanna also took this spiral journey through other mythologies, right?
Oh,
and she
yeah.
became like the myth of Demeter and Persephone, and then Venus, and then Aphrodite. So there's like, that Aphrodite on my wall is as close as an altar to that as I got, I think, in the creative process.
So beautiful.
Yeah.
So I would love to dive a little deeper into some of the songs specifically. And like maybe someday we can literally go track by track and talk about each one. I wish we had the time to do that here. But and it's hard. I don't have a favorite. I really think this is an album that is a holistic piece. I imagine it was hard for you to choose singles from it because the whole album is just like,
yeah.
That said, maybe we can talk about a couple of them.
Yeah.
An early song is called Knowing is the Call.
Yeah.
And this is the only song that, at least currently, when we're recording this, that you've shared the lyrics to on Bandcamp. Would you like to share the lyrics, or would you like me to read them?
I don't have them in front of me,
okay.
So if you could,
problem.
that would be great.
It goes, and I won't read the whole thing.
Yeah.
I hear an earth song. I hear a body song. I hear a spring song. The knowing is the call to be made and unmade by a force greater than yourself. And it goes on from there. And it's so beautiful. And I just wanted to, I know it's always like so awkward to read lyrics, but I just want to give people the idea also of the words, because there is something very like incantatory and ecstatic and spiritual about them that I think means that they're I don't want to say vague, but they're mysterious and universal. And so I think listeners will have different interpretations and different connection points.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, and I feel like very dorky sharing what I'm about to share with you, but I'm going to do it in the spirit of trust and vulnerability. So just like listened to No Rush in the bath, this album, and you're going to be surprised, but I've been listening to this album as I am doing my workouts. And I'm doing that because listeners know I'm on this new journey of trying to integrate my magic with my physical well being and exercising, not how I used to, which is like really loud music in a bright space, but making it like a sacred offering and reconnecting with my body and loving on it when I've had, a complicated relationship with it, as many of us have complicated relationships with our bodies. This has been like really medicinal music for me as I'm going through my exercises and as I do my workouts as a devotion now to Hygeia, the goddess of health. And so I just like your album is literally helping me like connect to my body and just really feel all that goddess energy while I'm taking care of myself. So I want to thank you for that.
That is so freaking beautiful. And like, can't even tell you, like, I'm teary eyed. And I have to say, I just listened to your episode with Kara Claymore. And I mean, yeah,
Yep.
we'll have a separate conversation, but it was
Yeah.
so great. And last night, actually, I had dinner with two close friends, one who is a yoga teacher and another who teaches somatic experiencing. And we're creating a movement class to the album. Yeah.
That is so perfect.
So
And I feel so affirmed because it's just like, I mean, it's like, and I can't do yoga currently, but if I could, this would be like the perfect yoga album. And the kind of exercise I'm doing right now, it's not super aerobic at the moment. It's a lot of like movement and weights and so it's very like deep and rooted work. And I'm so thrilled that you're going to do some kind of body oriented interpretation of the album.
And I'll share too, like I have a pretty complicated relationship to my body and to movement in particular, like and to dancing. And I spent a lot of time in the overdubbing phase as we were adding like layers and layers to the foundational tracks. I would go up to the top floor of my house where I have a picture of Hildegard did of the goddess Sophia, and I would dance to this music in my headphones and just and it really also helped me connect with my own body, and that is that's Inanna's magic.
That's so incredible. And of course, you talk about the body or you sing about the body throughout the album. In the track Noticing, which is another of my favorites. There's a line, try as I might to think of the answer, it's in my body. And then it goes on and you sing change is already taking place. And I realize that can be the body of the earth. That can be, the body of a creation of any kind. But it is very resonant for me as I'm literally trying to heal and strengthen myself right now. So how fabulous. I'm so happy that resonates with you.
I also want to share that you telling me that you listened to my last album in the bath has just always stuck with me. And there was the song called Numa on this album. Was one that if you're interested, we can talk about more. But I will just say that when I was waiting to get the recording back from Iceland, because something fucking magical happened on that track in particular.
Agree.
I thought of you. And I waited and I got in the bath and I listened to for the first time and I was just like crying and crying and it was
Kelli,
so thank you.
That's so beautiful. That makes me so happy. I love that track. It is so gorgeous. What else do you want to say about that? It comes later in the album.
That comes as Inanna or us or however you want to feel it is coming back from that underworld experience and is starting to integrate it. Numa to me represents the feeling I had when I went to Greece a couple summers ago and I had the top down in a convertible and I'm driving around this island and I'm just like, I'm so fucking happy to be alive,
Yes.
and like,
Yes.
God, life is so fucking hard, but it's also this, so
Yes.
that's what that
Yes.
song symbolizes to me.
How fabulous.
Yeah.
All right, let's zoom back out a
Yeah.
little bit because I feel like I got so excited to go micro on the album
Yeah.
that we should zoom out and go a little bit macro, which is it does seem as though there is a descent.
Mm-hmm.
It then feels like there's a real centerpiece, to me
Mm.
anyway, of this album, which is the track The Yes That Leads, which is over 10 minutes long. It's fucking epic. It's so beautiful and intense. And then there's kind of like a spaciousness that happens that to me at least feels like, okay, and now we're starting to go back on the ascent again. Is
Yeah.
that kind of how you feel about it energetically?
Oh, completely.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
good. Okay,
Yeah.
great. And let's talk about then that centerpiece track. The Yes That Leads is such a wonderful title, first of all. I don't know. I don't even know what to ask. Can you please just say words about that beautiful track, Kelli? Whatever you want
Yeah.
to share.
Yeah, I would say another mentor for me in the making of this record is, though she wasn't aware of it, is Vicky Noble,
Oh,
who is the
yes.
creator
The
of the
Mother
Mother
Peace
Peace Tarot.
Tarot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
So Vicky did all the writing for the tarot deck, and her then partner Karen did all the artwork. And I spent a lot of time with that deck. And I'm not 100% certain, but I want to say that the Yes That Leads comes from the Hanged One, from the
Oh,
reading of the Hanged One,
which
which I
makes
was pulling a lot.
which makes perfect sense with Inanna hanging in the underworld by the hook for a
Yeah.
while. And,
Yeah.
you know, this has come up before, but I think it's worth mentioning again that that tarot card, I think, is often misinterpreted.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas my understanding of it is this is a card of suspense, but also like surrender and receiving secret information. Like, and
Yeah.
some people interpret this as when Odin is hanging from the world tree and receives the runes, which is the
Yeah.
magical language, right?
Yes.
So it's those moments of initiation
Yeah.
where it might even feel like you're stuck, or it might
Yeah.
feel like you're totally upside down and things maybe aren't even going how you envisioned or wanted them to be, and you kind of just have to surrender to it, but
Yeah.
amazing wisdom is coming your way and
Yes.
deep magic, right?
Yes.
and
Yes.
and that's definitely how the Yes That Leads feels. It's so fucking intense, Kelli. That song is so intense.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm laughing because we played some live shows, some previews a couple months ago, and that was definitely the one where at the end, like, people did not know what to do with themselves. Yeah.
In the best way. In the best way, it's
Yeah.
intense. So let's talk about how you created these songs. You talked
Mm.
about improvising with other
Mm-hmm.
musicians.
Mm-hmm.
Where did the lyrics come in? What spaces were you working in? I mean,
Yeah.
as much as you care to share and giving us a peek behind the sonic curtain would be welcome.
Sure. Well, as I mentioned, I did this artist residency in Crete, and that's where I started writing what I refer to now as the seeds of the album. And at the time, I knew it was going to be about transformation, so I was collecting seeds that had to do with the cycle. And I was, I have my spreadsheets, which everyone teased me about, but I was slowly filling in the seeds into the spreadsheet of like where I needed information to express the cycle.
Incredible.
Yeah. And then and then we ended up recording the album in Iceland. And as I mentioned, I went there with a quartet, and all of us are, kind of have a similar background in jazz. So I think that was like our shared language. And basically each day we would start the session by just doing like free improvisation for however long, just to kind of like get us in that flow of things. And then we would visit a stage in the cycle, and I would kind of talk them through like my understanding of it and relate it to the myth of Inanna and kind of get them to touch into where they had experienced that in their own lives. and we would play the seeds and improvise them. And I think initially, because we thought we were going to create the album in a similar way that Talk did with Spirit of Eden, we just stretched them out into these like long form like landscapes that we imagined we'd be cutting up. And I definitely thought like I would be rewriting a lot of the lyrics and re-recording the vocals and yada yada. So I mean, in a way it helped make me be like just really like playful,
more free.
Exactly. And more free. But what I came to realize, you know, through the process, which was, you know, the making of the music was its own cycle of transformation, was that the recordings had a quality that could never be recreated, and they have a quality that you do not chop up. And so then we started bringing in a bunch of other players to come. We wouldn't send them the music in advance. They'd come into the studio, we'd hit play and record at the same time, and they'd be reacting to the music in real time.
Wow.
So, you know, going on their own journey, right? And then from that, we did a bit of chopping up and moving things around, but by and large, like what you hear now is like a giant collective improvisation.
That's pretty incredible. And that has to take a lot of trust and surrender on your part too.
Yeah. I could only see so far. Like this whole album, even to this day, feels like this dream that I can like see shapes of, but it's just like one step at a time. And then the shapes start to come clearer into focus. But it's on its own trip.
Oh, that's such an amazing synchronicity, because last night I was having dinner with a friend and she was talking about how she's trying to write something and how it feels like walking in the dark. And she brought up this Virginia Woolf quote, and I'm going to totally mangle it because I don't have it in front of me, but it's something to the effect where Woolf writes like, the future is dark and that's the best way it can be, I think. And it's, you know, this idea that like, it's a mystery, and that means it has the potential to be anything. Yes. And you kind of discover as you go, as you write, as you make music, as you make magic, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So the making of this music has really helped me surrender to that, approaching life like that.
Yeah. And the idea too, I love that you like had a spreadsheet. So you didn't go in, you had like some preparation and research, and yet I'm sure you were also like, and I'll abandon the plan if something better comes through, right? Yes. And it often does, at least in my experience. Yes. Like with my books, I outline them, but then they change as I'm writing them. And, you know, you can't like stick too closely to the map, because spirit might take you in this totally other terrain that's more interesting and more rich than you thought. But it's like nice to have a map when you first go.
Totally.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. So how has it been playing live? I have to guess that an improvised album might present challenges to play live, but maybe I'm inferring things.
Well, I think for now, at least, we're trying to stick pretty close to the recorded product. I just said product. To Understood. The recorded album.
You did, in fact, produce it.
True.
It is
Thank
technically
you. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, a product.
Yeah, we're trying to stick close to the garden. Let me say that. Okay. Yes. So because, you know, I think similar to like how I spent so much time with the seeds, and it was from that level of like embodiment and familiarity that I was able to branch out and allow it to, you know, become what it became. I think it's really important for the live crew, for all of us to like really get this music in the cycle in its current form in our bones. Yes. But long term, my dream is to start to open this thing up and to even like maybe align the performances with the seasons and have, you know, different ways that we're approaching, or use a different myth even, because the cycle of transformation is present in so many different stories. But I want to keep this exciting to all of us, because what I don't want to happen is what, you know, can happen when you're touring, where like you're playing the same thing night after night and it just becomes kind of like a job. And and I want to keep it alive.
Yeah. So. I can imagine that getting to hear this album live is different than a passive experience like that. It feels to me like it's going to be, I don't know, I keep coming back to that word, spiritual. And I know that you want to play it in different environments and not just the traditional sort of like clubs and stuff.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about where you foresee some of those shows taking place?
Yeah. I'm like, it's just one place and it's caves.
Yes. Caves, caves,
it's just
caves.
Yeah.
All day, all night, baby.
Yeah. And so we did do some preview shows, like I said, in Kingston, where I live in upstate New York.
Mm-hmm.
And we transformed the venue into a cave. Yeah.
Can you, what does that mean?
So I worked with a local artist named Amanda Russo Rubin, and she built a cave portal entry to cover the doorway into the venue. Yeah.
Incredible.
And there were many other magical elements that I'm a little bit keeping close to the cuff right now, but I will say that they will be there for you when we come to a cave near you. And it's like it's an immersive experience that is, bringing a lot of like ritual into form, because it's so important that it, like, the audience is informing the music just as much as the players are. And and it's all about bringing our creative energies together and our presence and our intention to create something that will never be replicated.
I cannot wait to see it myself. I really wanted to come to one of your shows in Kingston, and just the schedules didn't align. But and I don't know if you want to talk about this yet, but I saw one of the venues. I'll call that loosely. Where you will be performing in the fall, and I'm already like, I'm there.
Yeah, you have to come.
An incredible place to play. Yes.
Yeah. So, do you want me to share it, or?
I mean, I would, up to you. This is your
this
story,
is
my
hot
friend.
off the presses, folks.
Yes.
But we're playing in a cave in upstate New York in the town of Rosendale. And it's called Widow Jane Mine. So it's technically was a cement mine for many years, but it's a cave-like space, natural space. And we'll be there the last weekend in September for 2 nights.
Okay. I am so there. I need to coordinate with you. That sounds incredible. Kelli, how do catacombs strike you? Is that cave-like enough? Or does the natural space call for you? And the reason I'm asking is because, not that I haven't in there, but Greenwood Cemetery here in Brooklyn, they have concerts in the catacombs now. I mean, I could see this there.
I would be so down. It's very cave adjacent. I definitely prefer the natural setting, but Widow Jane Mine, as I said, it's like technically a mine, but we're going to call it a cave,
Right.
But catacombs, count me in.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
And I mean, I have to imagine that playing in literal caves is challenging. In terms of like wiring and temperature and all those things. Nonetheless, do you have other caves on your list that you'll be playing in, or do you just have places you're going to be approaching?
Well, I have another spreadsheet of caves. And so I've been doing a lot of research, and I'm also like putting the call out if anybody knows of a great cave. Ideally it's a cave that already has the infrastructure to host music, which you'd be surprised. There's actually a fair amount in the US, and I've been looking in Europe. So
fabulous.
Ideally they have infrastructure, but for the right cave, I'll do whatever it takes.
Oh my goodness. I want to come on tour with you.
Please.
I love caves. Like, for real. I've always loved them. I remember being little, and I don't know if you watched Reading Rainbow. But there was the cave episode where LeVar Burton talks all about like stalactites and stalagmites, and it blew my tiny mind. I could not imagine a more beautiful, sparkling world. And ever since then, whenever I can, go on cave tours and stuff, it's my favorite.
Me
and
too.
I even considered, I'm like, maybe I should, become a spelunker. I don't know. Haven't gone down that route. My trouble is I don't like to be cold, Kelli, but I love everything else about a cave.
Same. And most caves are like 55 degrees. So you just have to like bundle up. But I relate. I don't like to be cold.
Well, maybe we need to get down with some cave couture
Yeah,
and we'll
yeah,
just wear fabulous like fur-lined cloaks and robes and things, which would be appropriate, I think.
totally.
Ethical fake fur, I should
Yes,
just
of
say, for the
course.
people.
Of course.
Um, Now, I would love for us, I almost want to say like spoiler alert, but you did actually share the final track
Mm.
of this album publicly already.
Yeah.
So if you feel comfortable talking about the fact
Mm.
that we land on, at the end of this cycle, at least your musical cycle,
Mm.
Aphrodite, the
Mm-hmm.
goddess Aphrodite, and you invoked her earlier. She's
Yeah.
on your wall. And that is the title of the final track.
Mm-hmm.
What called you to end with Aphrodite?
For a while, we had that song in an earlier part of the cycle, and it just wasn't feeling right. And I think the more I realized what the song symbolized, which was for me coming to terms with the fact that, like, this is why I'm here. I'm here to make music, and this is my
Yes.
calling, and this is as hard as it is, and as little, validation that is there to support me sometimes. Like, I would die if I wasn't making music. And
Mm.
so to me, it represents both like the boon that we receive from going into the underworld, that wisdom that we receive, and it also represents that the cycle just starts all over again.
Mm. Exactly. And do you feel like Aphrodite is a goddess that is related to your music specifically somehow, or your understanding of yourself as an artist, or understanding of what an artist even is?
Yeah, I mean, I think especially like her relationship to water, and
Mm.
how much being in the sea in Greece helped me bring this project into form. Um, there's that, and then there's also like there's something like Sophia's another one. I know I mentioned her before, who comes up. I have her Hildegard's vision of her on my arm here.
Oh,
Um,
beautiful.
there's a relationship between Sophia and Aphrodite that just feels very true to me.
Mm.
Yeah, and then, well, I'll stop there. Yeah.
Oh, no, I want to know what else you were going
Well,
to say.
I was just gonna say, I'm also like, I'm a Pisces, and like my Venus is in Pisces. And so there's something here with
Yeah.
with these like goddesses that come from the sea, um,
Yes.
that just feels like where I came from. That's.
I have to say that this song is, I know it, what do I want to say? I often say that the most personal is the most potent, and that comes from our magic, that's true of our creativity, and the fact that something so personal to you is so powerful to me.
Mm,
um, I think really is a reflection of that principle because, and forgive me, I forget the exact lyric, but it's something to the effect of like, I was born to sing,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I think, yes, literally, you're singing about yourself, but it resonated with me on so many levels because, first of all, I also love to sing, and getting back to my own music and getting confidence around that has been a whole other journey I've been on. But even bigger than that, it's just like we were all born to sing. And it doesn't have to be literal singing. Singing is expressing your magic, your creative force, or your relationship to your creative force in
Yeah.
exactly the way you were born to do it.
Yeah.
So even though you're singing about yourself clearly in that
Yeah.
moment, and I got that, I also felt like I also was born to sing. And anybody listening to you sing those words is going to feel that way too.
Yeah. I'm so glad to hear that because that's definitely the message.
Oh, so, so splendid. Well, listen, Kelly, we just have a few more minutes.
Mm,
I know you're going to be going on tour. I also know that you have a double LP of this album that's
yeah.
available. And I'm so glad because I really wanted an LP of No Rush.
I
And
know.
so I'm
Yeah.
so glad I can
Okay.
get one of this album. What else do you want people to know? How can people find this music?
Mm,
How do you prefer people, download the music? I
sure.
imagine Bandcamp is probably preferable, but anything you care to share around that, please do.
Yeah, I would say in terms of like staying in touch and getting updates and stuff, my website's a great place, which is kelliscarr.com, also Instagram. And then
And I'll just interrupt to say it's
yeah.
Kelly with an I,
Oh yeah.
Kelliscarr.
Thank you. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then in terms of supporting the music, Bandcamp's definitely preferable.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you've heard streaming services aren't really cutting it for most musicians.
For
So,
sure.
yeah, stream away. But if you want to support the project, Bandcamp's an awesome way to do that.
Awesome. And is the double LP still available?
Yeah, it's still available. We're doing a limited first run. So we have some copies left. And
Save one for me,
I
Kelly,
will. I will,
please.
for sure.
I will order one from you.
Okay,
Yeah, for sure.
great.
Excellent. And people can get that at Bandcamp as
Hmm.
well or at your
Hmm.
shows?
Both. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
fabulous. And how can people learn about your tour and your amazing cave adventure?
Yeah, I do have a newsletter called The Loop that I send out once every week or two or three, depends. And that's the best place because that's where I really feel comfortable opening up to. And I'm sharing a lot of like behind the scenes about the project and, of course, the tour dates and stuff. But they'll also pop up like on my website and Instagram. And I think they also pop up on Spotify now.
So I'm going to give your newsletter a double plug because, and I say this with all sincerity, your newsletter is one of the few newsletters that I'm actually like excited to read because not only do I get to learn about what you're up to, but you also then shout out all these other projects that you're a fan of, books you're reading, like podcasts you're listening to, and you have impeccable taste. So I highly recommend that people sign up for your newsletter. It's really, really good.
I'm blushing. I didn't know you read it.
Of
Thank you
course.
so much. That's so awesome.
Kelly, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm a huge fan. I don't know if you can tell.
Well, it's very mutual. And I have to just say that, like, the way you responded to No Rush was like so affirming. And you were definitely in like the constellation of beings that this music was made with the intention to please. So,
I'm
yeah.
so honored. Now you're going to make me cry.
Yeah.
And mission accomplished. I am pleased. I'm delighted. I'm healed. Like, I just love this music so much. I love your music so much. And I
Thank you.
cannot wait to meet you in person
I
and hear
know.
your music live very, very soon.
Yes, for sure.
Yes. Kelly, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.